They didn't name me until the third day. I found that out years later by accident, while eavesdropping on one of Mom's coffee rants with her neighbor. We weren't even ready for another baby, let alone a girl, she'd said, stirring sugar into her cup. She came early. We weren't prepared. Didn't even name her until discharge. I remember the neighbor giggling like that was hilarious. And Mom? She didn't say it in anger. She said it in indifference. I grew up in a house that was always too quiet, except when it wasn't. My father, a strict man with a calculator for a heart, made his love known through rules. Turn off the lights. Don't. Waste food? Why are you reading stories? Study math instead. My mother was worse. Her love came in comparisons. You know, your brother won first place in third grade too? Your sister was neater at your age. You were different. They never hit me, but their words left bruises. At 5. I drew a picture of our family in kindergarten. Stick figures, but I made myself the smallest one. No face. When my teacher asked why, I said, because I'm just the extra one. I don't even remember thinking that. It just came out. I didn't know I'd already started believing it. Birthdays were the most telling. My brother had magician parties. My sister had princess cakes and ponies. I had leftover samosas. And whatever cake was on discount at the local store. One year, I overheard Mom talking to Dad. We shouldn't waste money on a party. She doesn't have many friends anyway. They weren't cruel. They just didn't care to pretend. But it was one sentence that seared itself into my bones. I was 9, hiding behind the curtain. During a family dinner, Mom was entertaining guests, laughing about her unexpected bundle. Well, the third one wasn't exactly planned. We were done after 2, you know. But she just happened in accident, really? But we managed. Managed like I was some last-minute expense in their budget. I ran to my room, held my pillow tight, and cried until my head ached. That night, I wrote in my diary with a blunt pencil. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be here, but I'll make them wish I was. They said I was a mistake, an afterthought, a financial burden. But I was never a burden. I was a blueprint. If you've ever been unwanted in your own home, subscribe, because one day the house won't just remember you. It'll belong to you. By the time I turned 16, I had learned to vanish in my own home. Not physically, no, I was always there. In the kitchen, scrubbing dishes, in the hallway, picking up after everyone. In the background, always. It was just easier that way. The spotlight was for my siblings. My brother David, the golden child, Strata student, debate team captain, basketball star. My sister Emily, the perfect daughter. Honor Society, choir soloist, and graceful enough to be Mom's favorite prop at tea parties. Me. I was the one who refilled their water glasses when no one asked. The one who sat quietly when they opened gifts and I got socks. When college decisions came, David got into Stanford. Mom cried. Emily followed a year later with a full scholarship. Dad threw a barbecue. I, too, got accepted into a good university. I printed the acceptance letter myself, proud, shaking. Mom, look, I got in. She didn't even glance at the paper. That's great, honey. But how are you going to pay for it? No celebration, no hug. Just a reminder that I wasn't worth the investment. I worked 2 jobs that summer, waitressing at a diner by day, cleaning offices at night. I saved every coin, skipped meals, cut my own hair. Still, I couldn't afford the dorms, so I found a tiny, run-down apartment an hour away from campus. Peeling walls, leaky tap, a fridge that hummed like a dying cow. But it was mine. It was peace, it was quiet, and didn't have to ask anyone for a key. During midterms, I stopped by the house to borrow a box of old books I'd left behind. Mom opened the door with a cold glance. Oh, you still have that key? I should have dropped it right there on her welcome mat. But I didn't. I went upstairs, quietly packed my things. As I reached the door, I heard her whisper to Dad, "She's still playing this college game. Maybe she'll drop out soon and settle for something normal." That night, I didn't cry. I studied harder, because if pain was fuel, I had enough to light up a continent. Fast forward 2 years, I was running on coffee, unpaid internships, and the belief that one day they'd regret every cold word they threw at me. One night at the cafe where I worked, a kind old woman, Mrs. Alvarez, tasted one of my leftover pastries and said, "This tastes like a memory I didn't know I missed. Should sell these." I laughed, but she was serious. "Start with one flavor. Sell to my friends. I know people." She wasn't lying. Sometimes your worth is invisible to the ones who raised you, but the world has a way of tasting what your family spit out. If they left you behind, subscribe, because your comeback might just be baked in sugar. I stayed up nights baking, creating, naming desserts after childhood wounds. Silent daughter, lemon cake with lavender glaze. Third child, bitter chocolate brownie with a chili twist. Accident baby almond tart. With cracked sugar glass on top, people ate them, and they felt them. Turns out, pain had flavor, and I was finally feeding the world something that belonged to me. One afternoon, while delivering a tray to a wedding, I bumped into my sister, Emily. She looked at the tray, then at me, then smirked. "Still doing food stuff? That's cute." I smiled back, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew something she didn't. I had 10 orders that week. 2 were from her friends, and I charged premium. They left me behind, but I found my pace, and one day, the girl they called invisible will serve them success with a golden spoon. Subscribe. Because being left out doesn't mean you're left behind forever. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a stain. A water ring appeared on the ceiling above my bed, faint, yellowish, shaped like a teardrop. I stared at it for weeks, willing it to disappear, but by the third rainfall, it dripped. Then, gushed. I was 21, broke, juggling a catering side hustle, school debt, and a cafe job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and the dreams alive. But dreams can't stop rainwater from soaking your mattress at 3 a.m. I moved my bed into the kitchen, slept beside the fridge, ate cereal with bottled water, still went to work at 6 o'clock the next morning, smiling, until I caught the flu. Then the flu turned into a fever, and the fever knocked me out. I missed 2 shifts. My boss, a stressed-out single mom, had to let me go. Not out of cruelty, she just didn't have the coverage. With barely enough left for food, I made a decision I swore I wouldn't. I went home. When I rang the bell, Mom opened the door, then checked the time like I had interrupted something important. Dad didn't even get up from the recliner. I stood there, shivering in soaked shoes and a hoodie that clung to my skin like shame. "I just need a place to stay for a few days," I said quietly. "My roof caved in. I'm sick. I won't be a bother." She crossed her arms, looked me up and down. "Didn't you choose to live independently? You said you didn't. Want anything from us?" I swallowed hard. "I still don't. I just need a roof, just for a few nights." Dad chimed in, not even looking my way. Actions have consequences. They didn't let me in. I walked 3 blocks to the bus station and used my last $28 to get a motel room. The sheets were scratchy. The heater barely worked. But at least the ceiling didn't drip. I curled up on the stiff bed and cried, queuing quietly into a pillow that smelled like mildew. Not because I was sick, but because, cue down, I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, being blood meant something. It didn't. When the people who made you won't shelter you, build a new roof, and make it tall enough that their pride can't reach it. If you've ever been turned away by the ones who should have let you in, subscribe. You're not alone. The next morning, I coughed up blood and passed out. When I woke up, I was in a free clinic. A volunteer nurse had found me after. I didn't check out. She gave me warm soup and a warm smile. Her name was Ava. And she asked no questions except one. "What's your dream, love?" I blinked. No one had asked me that before, not seriously. I whispered, "To own a bakery, with stories on the walls and music in the background, where people walk in for food, but leave with something sweeter." She nodded. "Then you're going to need to get better, because that kind of dream needs energy." It's paid for my medication. drove me back to my apartment, left a note on my counter. Get well. The world's waiting for your flavor. That night, I stared at the ruined ceiling and made a vow. I'll never ask to be let in again. I'll build something they'll beg to enter. A few weeks later, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside, an eviction notice. 3. Missed payments, no appeal. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a cake box. I texted every client I had ever served, all 12 of them, starting from scratch, homemade desserts. Free samples if you refer a friend. One replied, then another, then 20. My roof broke, my heart broke, but cracks let sunlight in, so I stood beneath the wreckage and baked a future with no ceiling. Subscribe. Because sometimes being shut out is how you learn to build doors. The first cake I sold came out of a broken oven. I didn't have a fancy kitchen, just a borrowed countertop, 1 working burner, and a neighbor named Mrs. Dalloway who let me use her oven in exchange for a slice of everything I made. If you're going to hustle, she'd say, at least let me taste the hustle. Gee, was 83 war pearls while vacuuming? It's called my cakes therapy and frosting. That tiny studio became my test kitchen. I worked with what I had: bruised fruit from the clearance shelf, leftover chocolate bars, and spices from thrift store jars with no labels. I learned the language of flavor the same way I learned the language of survival, silently, desperately, from scratch. I started an Instagram page. No face, no name, just desserts and captions filled with pain and poetry. A cracked lemon tart with, for every girl who was told she was too sour to be sweet. A burnt caramel cake captioned, she burned everything, except bridges. Chocolate cupcakes sprinkled with sea salt, because even sugar needs boundaries. People shared them, not because they were perfect, but because they felt like heartbreak with icing. One post went viral. It was a cake I called the mistake. Dark chocolate base, bitter espresso cream, topped with a cracked sugar heart. Caption, they said I was an accident. So I made desserts that feel like survival. The comments exploded. Women, men, teenagers. Where can I order this? This feels like my story. Grr, open a bakery or a church because this is healing. Orders poured in. I delivered by hand. Sometimes biking across town with a box balanced between hope and hunger. My savings started to grow. $100, then $1,000, then $5. It wasn't millions, but it was mine. I rented a tiny stall at a weekend flea market, called it Sugar and Stone. No big signs, no loud music, just a chalkboard that read, for the ones who were forgotten, for the ones who never got the first slice. People came, not just for the desserts, for the story. They shared their own. Told me about mothers who left, fathers who drank, brothers who disappeared, sisters who stole their light. They didn't just eat my cakes, they cried over them. And in return, I listened, because I knew what it meant to swallow pain with a smile. When life gave me silence, when they served me coldness, I added sugar. If they ever told you you're not enough, subscribe, because your flavor isn't meant for their tongues anyway. One Saturday, a woman in a tailored suit approached my stall. She was graceful, poised, and out of place among flea market chaos. You made this? She asked, holding a forkful of my almond orange cake. I nodded. Would you ever consider doing a pop-up in our gallery? She asked. Our events manager cried eating this. 2 weeks later, I was serving desserts at a private art show downtown. Rich people, well-dressed, polite, fake smiles. But they lined up for my cakes, like they hadn't tasted something honest in years. A man slipped me a card. Ever considered packaging this? We fund women-led culinary startups. I stared at the card all night. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a scam. It was real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a mistake in a house full of chosen children. I felt like a recipe whose time had come. That weekend, I posted a new cake, white chocolate, blood orange glaze. crushed peppermint shards. I called it inheritance. Caption, they didn't leave me anything, so I made something they'll one day beg to buy. My cakes weren't sweet, they were stories, and every slice said, I made it anyway. Subscribe because your story can feed more than just hunger. It can starve your past. I hadn't seen it in years. The house that cursed two-story shell, where my laughter was always a little too loud, okay? And my presence always a little too much. I wasn't looking for it, but the listing showed up by accident. One of my clients, a real estate broker, tagged me. In a story on Instagram, this property just went on the market. Perfect for a little cafe or community space. When I clicked the link, my throat tightened. The front porch with the cracked tile, the faded brown shutters, the dent in the railing from where I fell at age 7 and cried alone for 20 minutes. Before anyone noticed, I knew it instantly. My childhood home. It's for rent. At first, I thought, walk away, ignore it. Like ghosts rot where they belong. But my hand moved before my logic did. I called the agent. I'd like to schedule a viewing. 2 days later, I stood on the same porch that once rejected me in the rain. But this time, I wore designer boots and a trench coat stitched from success. The agent greeted me cheerfully. You'll want to act fast, she said. The owners are in a tight spot financially. Why they're begging for stable tenants. Why begging? The same people who once turned their backs on me for showing up at their door sick and shivering were now begging for help. Poetic. Inside. Everything smelled like old decisions. The wallpaper still peeled in the corner I used to cry in. The kitchen still had the dented cabinet door from when Mom slammed it after I burned toast. The upstairs bedroom, the one they never painted because she's just passing through, was empty. So empty it echoed. Would you like to make an offer? The agent asked. I nodded slowly. Yes, but not to rent. She blinked. Oh, want to buy it? Today. Some wounds don't need revenge. They need reclamation. If you've ever been shut out of a place you called home, subscribe, because one day the deed might have your name on it. The paperwork took less than a week. Turns out, desperation makes people move fast. They didn't even know who the buyer was. The agent handled everything. I paid in full. No loan, no delay. When the final contract arrived in my inbox, I stared at it. Owner Clara Monroe. Same name they never put on a birthday banner. Now printed on a deed. In ink that wouldn't wash away. A month later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, is this the landlord for 28 Hollow Creek Drive? It was my mother. I almost dropped the phone. We saw the listing on Craigslist. The home is available. Again, we're in need of a rental, she said, her voice tight. My husband and I have fallen on hard times. We can pay rent. We're not asking for favors. Every word sounded like gravel in her mouth. I cleared my throat, lowered my voice. I'll have my assistant email you an application. Thank you, she whispered. We really appreciate the chance. I hung up and cried, not because they needed me, but because I didn't feel the urge to scream. Where were you when I needed you? I had healed Dot, and now they would live in the house of their biggest mistake, owned by the mistake herself. They once kicked me out of that house. Now they walk into it. With a key I gave them. Subscribe because one day the ground they walked over you on will be yours to lease back or lock. The email came in at 7:42 a.m. Subject: rental application for 28 Hollow Creek Drive attached. A filled-out rental form, a scanned copy of their ID cards. A cover letter signed by my mother. Yes, a cover letter, like she was applying for a job instead of the roof under which I once begged for warmth. I stared at it for a long time. Her words were simple but revealing. We are clean, respectful tenants. My husband is retired and I freelance from home. We understand the value of caring for a place, especially one with history. We hope you'll consider us. History. Oh, there was history in every wall of that house. I remember screaming into my pillow the night they refused to attend my art showcase because Emily had choir. I remember sitting by the window for hours on my 12th birthday, waiting for a cake that never came. And now, they were the ones waiting. My assistant, Grace, noticed my silence. "You okay?" I blinked. "Yeah, just reviewing something personal. Want me to respond to this one?" I shook my head. "No, this one, I'll handle myself." Night. I drafted an email. Professional, cordial. No emotion. Subject: Re-rental application 28 Hollow Creek Drive from Clara Monroe. Owner to Jane and Martin Monroe. Jane and Martin, thank you for your interest in leasing the property. I've reviewed your application while your income is below the usual threshold for renters. I am willing to offer a reduced rate under special terms. First month's rent, waived monthly rate, $800 flat. 50% below market security deposit. Optional I believe in second chances. However, please note, the owner requires timely rent payments, respectful treatment of the space, and full adherence to the lease agreement. Welcome home. Best regards. Clara Monroe, you don't always need to slam the door shut. Sometimes you open it just wide enough to show them what grace looks like. Subscribe. Because the strongest revenge isn't rage, it's rising. The response came in 12 minutes. Clara, is this you? Just for words, I didn't answer. 2 weeks later, a moving truck backed into the driveway of the home I once cried inside. I watched from my car. Parked across the street, my father, now thinner, shuffled boxes with more grunt than pride. My mother, still neat and composed, wiped her brow like this move had drained her dignity. They didn't know I was watching, and for the first time, I didn't want them to. I didn't need their apology. I didn't want a tearful reunion. I just wanted to watch them live. In a space they once ruled over, now under my roof, by my rules. 3 days after their move-in, my assistant, Grace, knocked on my office door. You okay? I nodded. They moved in, quietly. No trouble. So, closure. I thought about it. Not quite. But peace. Yes, because I didn't rent them a house. I gave them a mirror, and every morning they wake up in it. They'll see their reflection in walls built by the girl they almost erased. They moved in thinking it was shelter, but it was a lesson. They didn't just move into my house, they walked into my memory. Subscribe. Because when your name is on the deed, they don't have to remember you. The walls will. The first rent payment arrived in a plain envelope with shaky handwriting. $800 in a money order. No note, no signature. No, I knew it was from them. I held it in my hands, feeling the quiet weight of irony. The same people who once told me I'd never amount to anything were now writing checks to me just to stay warm. I didn't gloat. There was no cruel laughter, no smug calls or taunting emails. I simply walked over to the bank, deposited it under Monroe Holdings, and updated the lease ledger. Tenants, Martin and Jane Monroe. Status, current, under new management. The second payment came early, folded neatly, this time with a note. Thank you for trusting us. We'll take good care of the house. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I believed them, but because that was the first time my parents had ever said thank you to me for anything. I installed a property manager, Grace's husband, Theo, a kind man with sharp instincts and zero tolerance for boundary crossing. He'd do monthly checks, collect rent, send updates. I told him everything. You sure you want them there? He asked. That's a lot of past to hold in one building. I don't want them punished, I replied. I just want them to know. Know what? That I didn't need their love. Let's build a life that holds power. The next update came in the form of a picture that Theo had sent a photo of the living room. It was redecorated simple. It's tidy, but one detail caught me. On the mantle, a photo of me from high school. In my art uniform, smiling, the very photo my mother once said was unflattering and pointless, now framed. On display, a silent shrine to guilt, or maybe regret. You don't have to scream. Kay, look at me now. Just live loud enough that your silence echoes louder than their words. Subscribe because sometimes the best revenge is the rent they pay to remember you. One day Theo called unexpectedly. Your mom invited me in for coffee today. Said she wanted to talk to the owner. I told her the owner prefers privacy. She'll ask any questions. No, but she looked like she had 1,000 she wanted to ask. I didn't respond. Part of me wondered if she knew, if she was starting to piece together that the landlord who offered her a second chance was the same daughter she'd once told, "You'll never survive out there. You're too sensitive." 2 months passed. Then, one Sunday morning, I received a voicemail. My father. His voice was hoarse. Softer than I remembered. "Clara, I don't know if you'll hear this, but if you're the one who bought the house, thank you. We don't deserve your kindness, but you gave it anyway. And I'm sorry." Click no explanations. No stories. Just a man's voice cracking under the weight of years. I saved the voicemail. Not because I forgave him, but because that was the first time I heard him call me by my name. Without disappointment attached to it, Grace and Theo noticed a shift. In me, I laughed more, slept better. I began exploring ideas for a second bakery. This time in a luxury neighborhood, one that would shock the people who once said I didn't belong. I called it Mistake, no more. When the soft launch happened, I didn't send my parents an invite, but I knew they came, Theo confirmed. They didn't enter. Just stood outside looking at the window display. Your mother wiped her eyes. Let them watch. Let them see the daughter they forgot rise higher than their pride ever allowed. They called me a mistake. Now, they write my name on envelopes with rent checks tucked inside. Subscribe. Because sometimes the best way to heal is to make the ones who broke you answer to your terms. It started with a knock. 3 gentle taps. No doorbell. No urgency, just hesitation wrapped in hope. I opened the door to find my mother standing there, hands clasped, lips tight, eyes watering. Behind her stood my father, holding a grocery bag like a peace offering. "We didn't know if you'd answer," she said softly. "I almost didn't," I replied. She nodded, swallowing hard. We wanted to invite you for dinner at the house. Your house. Just a meal, that's all." There it was, the irony. They were asking me into the house they once shut me out of. "Are you inviting your landlord?" I asked. Arching a brow, she gave a weak laugh. "We're inviting our daughter." The dinner table looked the same. Same wobbly leg. Same uneven runner. Same chipped plate I was always given. The one they claimed was just a coincidence. But this time I sat at the head. Not because I asked, but because my father pulled the chair out and said, "This seat is yours." There was chicken, with rosemary, mashed potatoes, soft bread rolls, all made by my mother's tired hands. The air was thick with tension, like everyone was waiting for a plate to shatter or a truth to explode. "The house feels warmer," my mom said nervously, "since you bought it." "Maybe it's the insulation," I replied, sipping water. Silence. Then my father cleared his throat. "You were right. Leaving was the best thing you ever did. You've built something we can barely understand." He looked up at me. "And you didn't owe us anything, but you still gave us shelter. That humbles me more than you know." My mother chimed in. "I lied when I said you were a mistake. I was scared. I didn't know how to raise someone so full of light." "So you tried to dim it," I said flatly. She didn't deny it. "Yes," she whispered. "I did. And I regret it. Every single day." Sometimes they only say sorry. When they're sitting at your table, eating the piece you paid for with pain, subscribe. Because silence may be golden, but an apology at your table is pure power. I didn't respond right away. I studied their faces, so aged, so softened, so unlike the towering shadows of my childhood. For a moment, I saw the people I once wanted them to be. And I realized they were finally becoming those people. Too late to change the past, but maybe not too late to exist in the present. "I don't need an apology," I said eventually. "I needed distance." And I got that. And from it, I built something. Something real, something strong. My father nodded slowly. You're stronger than we ever imagined. You didn't imagine me at all, I said. That's why I had to build myself from scratch. Another silence, but not a bitter one, just honest. Can we try? My mother asked. To be? In your life, a little. Even if it's just showing up to your store and buying a cake. No discount, I said with a half smile. She smiled back. Wouldn't dare ask. After dinner, I stood outside with them on the porch, the same one where they once sent me away. This place looks better with you in it, my dad said, looking up at the stars. That's because I rebuilt the foundation, I said. Not just the house, but the legacy. They served me dinner at a table that once denied me a seat, and in their words, found something more valuable than revenge, recognition. Subscribe, because sometimes power isn't proving them wrong. It's showing up anyway. I kept the deed in a simple black folder, no gold trim, no fancy stamp, just my name, printed clean and bold. Clara Monroe, owner. When I first signed it, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The kind of release you feel when a wound finally stops bleeding. Not because it's been bandaged, but because it's become a scar. A few weeks after that dinner, I walked through the house alone. I asked my tenants, my parents, to leave for an hour. No questions, just space. I walked every room. The bedroom where I used to cry into a pillow. The kitchen where I once asked if I could have seconds and got silence in return. The backyard where my siblings played while I was told to stay inside and be useful. I stood in the hallway. The air didn't smell like guilt anymore. It smelled like paint, fresh wood, clean walls, like someone had tried to cover the cracks. But I remembered exactly where every crack lived, in the living room. I pulled out the folder and laid it on the coffee table. The deed sat inside, crisp and powerful. This wasn't revenge. It was redemption, not for them, for me. Some stories don't end with apologies. Some end with paperwork, with proof, with your name where there's used to be. Subscribe, because your pain may not pay off in tears, but it can pay in titles. They came home to find the folder waiting. I didn't stay. I didn't explain, but I left a note on top. I lived my whole life thinking I had to prove my worth to you. But I was never worthless. You just couldn't see gold through your own dust. Now you live in a home built on everything I became without you. Respect it. And maybe heal inside it. Clara, they never replied. But I noticed the next time Theo visited, the house looked different. My photo was still on the mantle, this time next to a new one, a picture of my bakery in the kitchen. The old calendar had been replaced with one from my company, and on the door a small gold plaque read, "This home is loved," for the first time. It might have been true. Months later, during the grand opening of my third bakery, I gave a short speech. I stood in front of a packed crowd, investors, customers, and press. I wore a tailored suit, hair pinned back, confidence in every step. People ask why I name my stores what I do. Sugar and Stone, mistake no more. The Scar Bakery. The answer is simple, because sweetness isn't born from perfection. It's born from surviving what tried to break you. And every scar we carry can be the signature on something beautiful. The crowd clapped. Some stood. Some cried. And in the back of the room, I saw them, my parents. They didn't wave. They didn't speak. They just stood and listened. And for the first time in my life, didn't need more than that. They once told me I was a mistake. Now they live in the home my name owns. Now they clap. From the shadows of a life they never built. And me. I don't need their praise. I just needed the deed. Subscribe, because sometimes it's the best happy endings, proving that you were never the problem, just the prophecy they couldn't recognize.